You can probably picture it in your mind. A majestic circle of tall stones, with another ring of stones in the middle. But while the physical structure of Stonehenge is familiar to most of us, its history is rather mysterious. Who built Stonehenge? How and why did they build it? Was it for rituals, religious gatherings, or something else? There are no simple answers to these questions, but we'll look at what we know and what we don't, and go through some of the most intriguing theories. So just relax and let your mind drift as we explore the sleepy history of Stonehenge. The story of Stonehenge is full of mystery, speculation, and competing theories. But let's start with what we do know. Stonehenge is located on Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire, in southern England. Salisbury Plain is about 90 miles west of London. It's a wide, open space with few trees, and driving past it, you might think that there's not much there. But the area was inhabited in the Neolithic period, from around 4,100 to 2,500 BCE. And the people who lived there left a few things behind, most notably Stonehenge itself. The monument stands out, especially as it's in the middle of a flat, sweeping expanse of grass. The outer ring is formed of tall stones placed in vertical positions. Each one weighs around 25 tons. Some of these vertical stones are topped by horizontally placed stones, so they look a bit like arches or a colonnade. The idea of moving these enormous boulders, let alone maneuvering them into such positions, is mind-boggling. The stones create a wide circle, and inside this circle are stones of different heights, some tall, like the ones on the outside, and some that are smaller. At first glance, Stonehenge might seem less impressive than other ancient monuments, such as the pyramids in Egypt or the Colosseum in Rome. But as soon as you start to think about Stonehenge, all kinds of questions and mysteries emerge, and each one leads to another. First, let's consider the age of the monument. As far as we know, the first significant construction was a circular ditch built around 3100 BCE. Stonehenge, as we know it, was constructed centuries later. The first stones were erected in 2500 BCE. And we know that a couple of hundred years later, the smaller stones in the center were moved to their current positions. Stonehenge was built in stages. It's estimated that construction took place over a period of at least 1,500 years. Still, although we have approximate ideas of dates, it's hard to know for sure. Archaeological findings, along with technology like radiocarbon dating, provide some information. But other factors make things a little more complicated. For instance, The effects of natural changes to the land over time, or the disturbances caused by burrowing animals like badgers. However, it's safe to say that Stonehenge as a monument is approximately 4,500 years old. It was built at roughly the same time as the pyramids in Egypt. The issue of Stonehenge's age also raises another interesting question. What was there before? This is part of what makes history so fascinating. You can always go further back. And in the case of Stonehenge in particular, it's worth taking a moment to consider the area's earlier history. It might provide some helpful clues. In the Mesolithic period, around 8000 BCE, a few pits were constructed in the area. Some of them seem to have held tall posts made of pine. And because of the alignment of the posts, it's been suggested that they had ritual significance. We don't know exactly how these posts relate to Stonehenge, but they indicate that thousands of years before the monument was built, there was activity in the area. This part of the country seems to have appealed to people. Perhaps they were drawn to it because of its openness, a contrast from the densely wooded land that made up most of England at the time. What we do know is that even before the stones of Stonehenge were erected, the area was associated with burials. For instance, close by are some tombs known as long barrows. Each mound of earth could have held up to 50 bodies. Then there was the ditch we mentioned earlier, built around 3100 BCE. This large circular ditch was dug with antler tools and used as a cemetery. The cremated remains of at least 63 individuals, men, women and children, were buried on the actual site of Stonehenge. And it's possible that the smaller stones were used as grave markers. As we consider the very early history of Stonehenge and the people who were buried there, the human side of the monument begins to emerge. We start to wonder who built it and how, considering the enormous size and weight of some of the stones. These are the questions we'll turn to next. Of course, as you can imagine, there's no straightforward answer to the question, who built Stonehenge? Given the age of the site and the lack of written records, we can't identify the individuals who constructed it. Even in the case of comparatively modern monuments, churches and cathedrals, for instance, we rarely know the names of the individual laborers, only the architects. Unfortunately, and rather unfairly, the people who put in the physical work remain anonymous. In the case of Stonehenge, there's also another complicating factor. It was built in different stages over a period of centuries. So there would have been countless builders, most likely from a variety of different backgrounds. However, DNA analysis of bodies that were buried near Stonehenge may tell us something. The ancestors of these people were originally from Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. They traveled across the Mediterranean, reaching Britain in about 4000 BCE. Centuries later, their descendants formed a community that lived in the Stonehenge area. It's likely that some of them were the builders. Another study, based on the analysis of bone fragments, suggests that some of the people buried at Stonehenge came from Wales. Interestingly, some of the stones themselves originated from the same area of Wales, the Preseli Hills. So, these people left their homeland and perhaps brought the stones with them to England. They may have then contributed to the construction of Stonehenge. Of course, we can't know for sure if they were the ones who built it, but the study shows that the bone fragments are contemporary with the monument, and they were buried nearby. So, it seems likely. The smaller stones, known as blue stones, are the ones that came from Wales. They weigh about 2 to 5 tons each, and were transported to Stonehenge from the quarry in Wales, a distance of about 150 miles. So you may be wondering, why go to all that effort? One theory is that the blue stones belonged to an earlier monument in Wales. When the community relocated to England, maybe they decided to take their stones with them, as a reminder of their origins. But the real mystery of Stonehenge construction relates to the larger stones, the ones weighing 25 tons. How on earth did the builders move them into position? And for what reason? Let's start with the first question, the construction of Stonehenge. As we've said, the blue stones were transported from Wales. Later, builders added the larger stones that form the outer ring. These are known as sarsen stones, and they're a kind of silcrete rock which is very hard and resistant. Thankfully, the builders didn't have to go all the way to Wales to get these stones. Recent research shows that some of the sarsens most likely came from closer by, an area called West Woods, about 19 miles from Stonehenge. However, not all the sarsens came from there. We may never know the exact origin of all the stones, but what we know without a doubt is this. Constructing Stonehenge involved the transportation of many bulky stones. The heaviest weighs 30 tons. To put that in perspective, 30 tons is 30,000 kilograms, about the weight of a sperm whale. So, in order to transport the sarsens to Stonehenge, many people would have had to work together, most likely using a sturdy wooden sledge. They may even have constructed a wooden track, a bit like a railway, to move the stones to Stonehenge. Then, once the sarsens arrived at the site, they had to be worked into shape. Waste material, as well as various hammerstones, have been found near Stonehenge. Workers would have hammered away at the sarsens, refining their shapes, before the stones were finally erected. And of course, once the vertical stones were standing, they needed to add the horizontal slabs, the ones that lie on top, forming a kind of roof. To do this, workers had to create precisely interlocking joints, using techniques more commonly used in carpentry. You should consider these joints a kind of hinge, and that, incidentally, might be the origin of Stonehenge's name. The first part comes from an Old English word meaning stone, while the second part, henge, may come from a word meaning hinge. But there are other ideas too. Some think that henge means hanging, because the stones appear to be suspended in the air. Alternatively, henge might mean gallows. Some of the stones resemble the medieval execution device, two upright posts with a bar over the top. As you can see, almost nothing at Stonehenge has a single, undisputed explanation. Now, let's get back to the construction work. Imagine the scene. Stonehenge, half built, with the enormous sarsen stones still lying on the ground. How did they lift them into position? The commonly accepted theory is that the builders used a system of ramps, ropes, and counterweights to lift the stones. Then, once the vertical stones were in place, they would have used wooden platforms and levers to raise the horizontal stones before carefully slotting them together. While this seems plausible, not everyone is convinced that this is the technique the builders used. Still, however it was done, there's no doubt that the construction of Stonehenge was an extraordinary undertaking. It took hundreds of years, and the efforts and ingenuity of countless people to put the stones in position. Now, before we move on, let's take a moment to appreciate something which may not be obvious. Many of the facts we've mentioned, such as findings about DNA or the exact origin of some of the stones, are very recent discoveries. For most of history, Stonehenge has seemed truly mysterious. People just didn't know who built it, or how, or why. And that explains the sheer number of theories about Stonehenge. So, it's time to address that tricky question. Why exactly was Stonehenge built? As you've probably guessed, there's no simple answer. What we have are lots of different theories. Some are plausible, while others are a bit out there, to say the least. It's also worth considering that some of these theories are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Given its long existence, Stonehenge may have originally been built for one purpose and then used for another. So, let's keep an open mind as we go through the theories. The possible explanations for why Stonehenge was built, or what it was used for. As we've mentioned, there are no written records. Our evidence comes from the stones themselves, and in particular, their positions. The sarsen stones appear to have been positioned in alignment with the movements of the sun. On the summer solstice, you can see the sun rise near the heelstone, a large sarsen block that stands alone. And on the winter solstice, the stones frame the sunset. It seems unlikely that this positioning was coincidental. The stones must have been arranged in this way for a reason. In the 1960s, researchers came up with a theory. Stonehenge was built as an astronomical observatory, or even some kind of ancient computer that could predict eclipses. From analysis of the stones' positions, it seemed that the people who built Stonehenge may have had sophisticated astronomical knowledge. These days, however, most scholars consider this theory to be over-optimistic. Besides, there's a simpler explanation for the alignment of the stones. They may have been used to mark and celebrate the solstices, or perhaps just the winter solstice. Stonehenge is commonly associated with the summer solstice, but, as academics have pointed out, in midsummer, the sun doesn't rise exactly behind the heelstone. It rises to the left of the stone and then goes right over the top, but the winter solstice is framed perfectly. You can watch the sunset right in the middle of the central arches. We also have some archaeological evidence which suggests that in ancient times people gathered at Stonehenge for the winter solstice. A couple of miles away is a Neolithic settlement known as Durrington Walls. It's believed to be the home of the people who built Stonehenge. When excavating Durrington Walls, archaeologists found huge amounts of animal bones, the remains of pig and cattle. These animals were slaughtered when they were about 9 months old, which means they were born in the spring. So they must have been slaughtered in the winter, around the time of the solstice. That suggests that people at Stonehenge may have had big feasts to celebrate the winter solstice. And this could be a simple explanation for the construction of Stonehenge. It was built to celebrate the solstice. The alignment of the stones definitely seems significant. However, there are also other relevant factors that need to be taken into consideration. As we mentioned earlier, archaeologists have also uncovered many human bones in the Stonehenge area. The site seems to have been used as a cremation cemetery for a period of around 500 years, and many of these burials predate the monument. In 2016, researchers published an article with some interesting observations. The earliest burials at Stonehenge were in an area known as the Aubrey Holes, a ring of chalk pits in the ground. As well as being a burial site, this area also seems to have contained bluestones. Perhaps there was a symbolic connection between the deceased individuals and the stones. At first, people were buried around the Aubrey Holes, but later burials were moved to a different location, so they were further away. Over the course of time, as Stonehenge evolved as a site, perhaps the symbolism changed too. Initially, it might have been a monument for specific individuals. The bluestones were tombstones. But then, Stonehenge changed into a more general monument, where people could collectively pay tribute to their ancestors. The stones were no longer specific, but represented the dead on a wider scale. This is one of the most popular and convincing theories, that Stonehenge was built as a tribute to the dead. And it certainly seems plausible that Stonehenge was a sacred site. That would explain why people put so much time and effort into building it. And whether it was built to honor the dead or for some other reason, it seems to have been a meeting place, designed to bring people together. Of course, the construction of the monument would have also brought people together. A team-building exercise on an epic scale. And then, once Stonehenge was built, maybe it stood as a symbol of unification. The archaeologist Mike Parker Pearson has suggested a possible interpretation for the 5 trilithons at the center. The trilithons are what you probably picture when you think of Stonehenge. They're the structures formed of 2 vertical stones with another horizontal stone lying on top. According to Parker Pearson, the 5 trilithons could have represented unity. 5 different tribal lineages coming together to honor their ancestors. Consider the fact that at the time of Stonehenge's construction, the population was in decline, and there weren't many villages. That might explain the need for a place like Stonehenge, a monument that created a sense of community. Alternatively, people may have gathered here for a more practical reason. It's been suggested that Stonehenge was a place of pilgrimage, where people came to be healed. Some of the bodies that were buried in the area have signs of skeletal trauma and deformity. Perhaps these people had come to Stonehenge in the hope of a miracle cure, believing that the stones had magical properties. Now, here's something interesting, which might add credibility to the theory. The area where the blue stones originate from, an outcrop of the Preseli Hills in Wales, is full of springs, and those springs have long been regarded as having healing powers. That could explain why the stones were transported such a distance. Perhaps Stonehenge was a primeval version of Lourdes in France, attracting hopeful pilgrims. It's a different way of looking at the monument, as a place for the living rather than the dead. Another theory also emphasizes the importance of the blue stones. Researchers experimented with rocks in the Preseli Hills, the same kind as the blue stones that were brought to Stonehenge. And what they discovered is that many of these stones were ringing rocks. When struck, they made ringing sounds in different tones like bells. If the builders of Stonehenge were aware of this, perhaps that's why they decided to transport the blue stones from Wales to England. It's a nice idea. Stonehenge being used as an instrument. Also, it's not just the blue stones that have interesting acoustic properties. Recent research has focused on the overall acoustics of Stonehenge, which may be a clue as to how the site was used. Professor Trevor Cox, an acoustics researcher, made a replica of Stonehenge to scale, using 3D printing. The model was then placed in a specially designed room and surrounded with loudspeakers and microphones, so he could test the effects of different frequencies. Through his experiments, Cox was able to study the acoustic properties of Stonehenge, the effect of the human voice or music on the stones. And what he found was this. Essentially, Stonehenge is an echo chamber. Sound bounces from one stone to another, then lingers. This reverberating effect enhances music, making it sound more powerful. Also, inside Stonehenge, the human voice is amplified by 4 decibels. So, if someone's speaking, it's much easier for the others to hear them. Today, these effects are something that we take for granted. When we enter a space with good acoustics, like an auditorium, we might not pay attention. But think of how amazing it would have been for people living thousands of years ago, experiencing this effect for the first time. It must have added something to the atmosphere of Stonehenge. Although we don't know for sure, it's possible that these acoustic properties were connected to the function of the monument. Maybe special meetings or ceremonies took place within, and people took advantage of the sound effects to give speeches or play music. At this point, we've covered some of the most convincing theories about why Stonehenge was built and how it might have been used. But there are other theories too, which are also worth mentioning. However far-fetched they might seem, they still tell us something about Stonehenge, how the monument has meant different things to different people. It seems that in the absence of evidence, or if you choose to ignore the evidence, Stonehenge can be almost anything you want it to be. In the 12th century, the Welsh cleric Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote a history book, which included a creative explanation for how Stonehenge came to be built. Long, long ago, giants brought the stones from Africa to Ireland. Then, in the 5th century, King Aurelius Ambrosius decided to build a memorial to British noblemen who had died in battle. With some help from the wizard Merlin, the army transported the stones from Ireland to England, where they remained. There are also various tales of Stonehenge in English folklore. According to some, the architect was none other than the devil himself. Considering the many mysteries of Stonehenge, it's not surprising that some people have turned to paranormal explanations. In 1968, the Swiss author Erich von Daniken published Chariots of the Gods. In this book, he suggested that Stonehenge, along with other ancient monuments such as the Egyptian pyramids, may have been built by extraterrestrials, or at least inspired by them. So, there you have it. Stonehenge was a landing pad for alien spacecraft. If you're not quite convinced, here's yet another theory to consider. It was proposed by Anthony M. Perks, a gynecologist, in 2003. In an essay published in a medical journal, Perks suggested that the structure of Stonehenge was symbolic. In his words, it might represent the opening by which Earth Mother gave birth to the plants and animals on which the ancient people so depended. Perks sees Stonehenge as a fertility symbol. However, it has to be said that this visual similarity is only really apparent when Stonehenge is viewed from above. And, as one skeptical archaeologist has observed, as far as we've been able to tell, they didn't have hot air balloons in prehistoric times. But Perks isn't the only one who sees a connection between Stonehenge and fertility. Some believe the monument may have been built as part of a fertility cult. According to Professor Terence Mead, Stonehenge, like other ancient stone circles, was built to cast specific shadows on certain days of the year. At sunrise, the long shadow of the heelstone would enter the monument. It would then reach the center, hitting an altar stone that was considered to be symbolically female. Naturally, not all archaeologists are convinced by the fertility cult theory. But at this point, it's hard to imagine any theory gaining universal acceptance. As we come to the end of our history of Stonehenge, let's reflect on a quote from the archaeologist Jaquetta Hawkes. "Every age has the Stonehenge it deserves or desires." Many of the theories we've looked at are clearly a product of the time and the culture. For instance, in the 1960s, scientists were excited about the potential of computers. At the time, it was suggested that Stonehenge could be used as a calculating machine, an idea that's since been debunked. So, if every age has its Stonehenge, what is our Stonehenge? And what's next? Hopefully, scientific developments will provide new insights. For example, By analysing the isotopes of bones or teeth enamel, scientists can learn about the migration history of the people buried at Stonehenge. We can learn more about where they came from. Similarly, DNA analysis could shed light on the genetic relationships between people who were buried together. The hope is that eventually we'll get a more detailed picture of the people who lived and died at Stonehenge. And that in turn might give us more clues or even answers about why the monument was built and how it was used. We might be entering a new era for Stonehenge, an era of long-awaited scientific breakthroughs. And yet, there might be those who prefer not to have the answers, or for whom the mystery is part of Stonehenge's appeal. Some visitors are happy to walk around these towering stones and simply admire them for what they are, the impressive remains of an ancient past which can never be completely known or understood. For these visitors, it's enough to be in the presence of the stones, simply to look and to imagine. Then are those who come for the solstice. In June, Druids, pagans and pilgrims from all walks of life spend the night at Stonehenge to celebrate the beginning of summer. At dawn, they watch the sun slowly rise behind the heelstone. The golden rays are channeled into the center of the circle. And in this moment, we can believe that Stonehenge is being used and experienced just as it was meant to.